Who could have imagined that in the near future, taking a breath of fresh air could be life-threatening? At this time, the Earth is filled with deadly toxic gas, whether human or animal, just a few breaths, and they will die on the spot within 3 minutes. The once bustling streets have now all turned into silent ruins, with not many survivors left, only able to hide underground to eke out an existence. However, they have not given up hope and have concentrated resources to establish a research institute with the aim of finding a way to eliminate the toxic gas. This might be humanity's last chance to save civilization. The woman in front of us is named Clara, an external staff member of the Research Institute. She has been working at the underground monitoring station for several years, and her daily job is to record data related to the toxic gas. Although the origin of the gas is unknown, it is dissipating at a very slow rate. Based on the current data model calculations, in about a year, humans will be able to go to the surface and breathe freely. It is a seemingly unattainable hope that is breathed freely for the dull and tedious embryon life. The woman looked at the map display on the screen, knowing that many colleagues were engaged on the scene work to her. That night, while Clara was reading, the computer suddenly made a notification sound. It was a message from headquarters, reminding Clara to check for supply deliveries. Early the next morning, Clara put on heavy protective gear, took a weapon, and went to the surface to collect the supplies. Although she was mentally prepared, the scene before her still made Clara's heart sink. The air was filled with a gray mist, and the broken streets emitted a scent of desolation. The woman quickened her pace, eager to escape this despairing scene. The drone delivering supplies arrived on time, but its landing point was off. Clara had no choice but to brace herself and jump into the water. Fortunately, the box was well sealed, and the food inside remained dry. This box of supplies would last for more than half a month. Although in the bunker there is no need to worry about food and clothing, the loneliness is not something everyone can bear. The monotonous life goes on day after day, until one day the computer suddenly indicates a network disconnection, which means she's completely out of contact with headquarters. Without supply deliveries, when she starved to death in the bunker, Kayla thought of her colleague at the neighboring signal station. Maybe she could contact headquarters through them. After organizing her protective gear and self-defense weapon, the woman once again stepped out of the underground bunker. This time, she also brought along her most trusted robot companion, a flying machine resembling an eagle. Passing through the abandoned city shrouded in toxic gas, Kayla finally reached the adjacent signal station. As she opened the bunker's iron door, it was unexpectedly filled with wastewater. A sense of foreboding rose in the woman's heart as she quickly climbed to the top of the signal tower, only to find her colleague slumped over the desk, motionless. Kayla walked over to confirm that the other person had already passed away, and there was a farewell letter on the table. It turned out that this colleague, upon returning from an outing, found his bunker flooded. He turned to contact headquarters for rescue, but couldn't get through. He couldn't hold on any longer, and tears fanned himself. Kayla picked up the walkie-talkie to call headquarters, and sure enough, the screen showed that the wireless was disabled. Cold sweat seeped from the woman's forehead. It wasn't just because of her colleague's death. What should she do next? Staying here would surely lead to death. Looking at the map in her hand, Clara found that the headquarters was not far from here. She had a feeling something had happened, and decided to walk to the headquarters to investigate. She found a car to rest in for the night, then composed herself, and continued on her way. The mechanical drone stayed by her side, as she knew that in this world, it's not only toxins that can be deadly. Vaguely seeing survivors ahead, Clara cautiously chose to avoid them. Stopping and starting along the way, she finally arrived at the Research Institute headquarters. Entering the base through identity recognition, the filtration system here is more advanced, allowing free breathing even without a gas mask. To Clara's surprise, there wasn't a single person in sight, as if her colleagues had vanished into thin air. She searched for clues and finally found an email on a computer sent to all departments. Due to the shortage of supplies, the base decided to terminate the research project, and everyone was instructed to pack up and evacuate the headquarters. However, Clara never received this notification, which made her feel abandoned by headquarters. No wonder the internet inexplicably went down a few days ago, and even the walkie-talkie signal mysteriously disappeared. Just as Clara was deep in thought, 3 survivors suddenly rushed into the bees. The woman reacted swiftly, instantly taking down 2 of them, and the remaining one knelt on the spot. Clara opened the map in her hand. The nearest shelter would take a month to reach, and her supplies would only last for 3 days. It seemed she had to return to her own bunker first, with the stock could at least supply her for 10 days to half a month. However, on the way back, her flying machine inexplicably went out of control, and several survivors suddenly appeared, knocking Clara unconscious. When the woman woke up again, a muscular man was standing in front of her. His name was Hank, and he had applied several times to join the Research Institute, but was rejected each time, so he had to scavenge for trash on the ground to survive. Keela hurriedly explained that the Institute did this to concentrate resources to save the world, but Hank sneered at this rhetoric. The now empty base was the best proof. They were clearly just finding excuses to monopolize the best resources. At this point, Hank immediately raised his gun, threatening Kella to hand over the most valuable flying machine. Kella naturally couldn't lie that the Eagle was patrolling in the distance and wouldn't be back for a while. Hank chuckled, saying he had plenty of time anyway. However, what he didn't know was that Kella had already secretly unlocked the handcuffs. Taking advantage of the guard's inattention, she picked up a chair and smashed it over. Efficiently dealing with the guard, Kayla didn't forget to take his weapon and gas mask, quickly ran to the base entrance, and saw a woman sharpening a knife. He immediately pulled out a dagger and stabbed fiercely. The noise alerted a nearby guard, who raised his weapon and fired wildly without hesitation. Just as Kayla had nowhere to escape, the Falcon drone arrived in time. Kayla was about to step forward to check the situation when another guard appeared behind him. Just as he was about to be subdued, a gunshot suddenly rang out, and the guard behind him fell to the ground. Kayla looked up in confusion and found that the woman who fired the shot looked exactly like him. But there was no time to think about it now. He had to escape from here first. The two rushed into a room and Claude was suddenly grabbed by a guard who appeared. The woman had limited strength and was firmly subdued. Fortunately, at the critical moment, he removed the opponent's mask. The guard fell to the ground, instantly losing his life, while the strange woman on the other side was also in a tough fight. The big guy Hank stood out in the crowd, and with no bullets left in his gun, Kayla could only pick up a stick and thrust it forcefully into Hank's abdomen. The big man let out a painful roar, knowing he couldn't escape death. In anger, he destroyed the drone controller. Clark picked up the handgun, intending to shoot him dead, but ultimately held back, as Hank was just another poor soul struggling in the apocalypse. After dealing with the enemy in front of him, Claw eagerly asked the woman about her origins and why she looked exactly like him. The woman calmly stated that actually, we are all clones, products of the Clara project at the Research Institute. Clara didn't believe this explanation at all. He grew up in the Research Institute and worked in the underground fortress for the Institute for 10 years. How could these memories be fake? The clone, with a cold expression, continued to reveal that the real memories in Keeler's mind were just codes edited by human genes. Previously, he found encrypted files of 2 failed projects at the Research Institute's headquarters, and the recently established Keeler project was actually about creating hundreds or thousands of clones to replace humans in performing dangerous or tedious tasks. However, with fewer and fewer survivors now, the headquarters ultimately decided to terminate the project, and the previously created clones naturally became abandoned. This female clone could not bear the fate of being abandoned and vowed to confront the elite humans of the Institute for answers. Recently, she has been searching for their whereabouts. It is said that there is no toxic fog in high-altitude places, excluding the highlands visited before. The female clone speculates that this abandoned high-rise and the nearby mountaintop are most likely to become the new base of the Institute. Clara also felt unsettled and decided to follow her. The two first arrived at the nearest high-rise, but as soon as they entered, a loud broadcast sounded from the air. It turned out that this place had long been occupied by survivors. The other party signaled for Kella to pick up the phone on the wall. Unexpectedly, the man had already seen through the identities of the two clones and said he had established a camp in the mine where no gas masks were needed and supplies were plentiful, inviting Kella and the other to join. However, the clone harbored a deep hatred for humans and only pretended to agree. When the guards came to welcome them, he directly shot and killed them. This action undoubtedly stirred up a hornet's nest. The doors of the abandoned building automatically closed. Hiding behind a wall, Killer saw a grenade flying in and immediately picked it up and threw it out the window. Both sides quickly fell into battle. In the chaos, a guard took Clara hostage, threatening the clone to drop her weapon. However, the woman was not to be outdone and turned to take another guard hostage. Both sides originally agreed to exchange hostages, but the clone's hatred was hard to suppress, and she couldn't help but open fire. Another fierce battle ensued. Although the two managed to escape, unfortunately, the clone was seriously injured, and his protective suit was soon stained red with blood. Keela supported the woman, struggling with each step. Just as they were about to reach the mountaintop, the clone finally collapsed from exhaustion. He said his last wish was to see the newly established base of the Research Institute. Keela nodded, carrying the clone's hopeful vision, and climbed to the top alone. However, in front of them was still a wasteland shrouded in toxic fog, with not a single survivor in sight. Clara forcibly contained her sadness and returned to the clone's side to gently comfort him. She said she saw many survivor humans on the mountaintop, where there was no toxic fog, and children were happily playing. After hearing this, the woman closed her eyes with immense relief. Even though she's a clone, she genuinely hopes the world can return to its former beauty. Clara didn't want to disappoint her, so she made up this kind lie. At this moment, Clara once again became a loner. Dragging her weary body back to her original residence, she found the entrance had been opened. Rushing inside, Clara saw that all the stored supplies were completely destroyed, and sitting on the sofa was the man she had previously spared, Hank. Realizing she had at most a week to live, Clara let out a desperate scream and finally couldn't resist pulling the trigger. The above is the entire content of the separate screenlet, Clara. The final twist completely takes the movie in another direction. Even though the female protagonist knows she is a clone and has been ruthlessly abandoned by humans, she always retains a sense of human kindness in her heart. However, it is precisely this kindness that ultimately cost her the hope of survival. In such an apocalyptic situation, would you choose to continue upholding kindness or resort to any means necessary to survive? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments section, and see you next time.